Well, hello again. Politically incorrect older white guy here again. I just have two topics I'd like to touch on today. In the background, you can see the skull of a Cape buffalo that I shot in South Africa several years ago on a hunting trip. So this was a trophy hunting expedition. It's not a particularly good trophy, but it's a quote unquote representative of the species. The reason I point that out is in the news here recently, there has been a lot of uproar about a gentleman from Dallas, Texas, who apparently is quite well to do, went on a hunting trip again, South Africa, same place, although he was hunting in the northern part of the country, not Zululand, which is where I hunted for this particular buffalo. He was up in the Limpopo province, which is up in the north, on a rather large piece of property. I don't remember exactly how large, I think 50,000 acres, something like that. And unfortunately, events didn't go as planned. The hunter was gored by the buffalo and died in the presence of his family, or some of his family members who were there to witness this unfortunate accident. And that's not really the story. The story is the comments that this raised on, I believe it was Facebook or someplace where the story was published. There was a torrent of comments, most of them critical of the hunter, critical of rich people in general, critical of trophy hunting, rather nasty comments all around, and most of them pretty ignorant. So I wanted to give you my point of view on this story in particular and the subject of trophy hunting in general. Yes, it's true that a large number of Americans travel to Africa every year to hunt for trophies, which they, by definition, want to display on their walls, and so they can relive the events and recount their adventure, I suppose, to their friends and families, which some people find obnoxious, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But there's another side to the story, particularly in South Africa, but in most of Africa in general. The only reason wildlife exists outside of the national parks is because trophy hunters are willing to pay large sums of money to go to enjoy the African hunting experience. Many have read about hunting in Africa in the novels and Wilbur Smith books and Robert Rock books that they read when they were younger and have aspired to live that adventure. And when they get older and they have a little money, in some cases a lot of money, they go to Africa and they experience hunting in Africa firsthand. There are two general types of hunting experience. One is what's derisively referred to as a canned hunt, where the animals are raised on private property, which is fenced, usually quite large, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of acres. And they're scientifically managed. And yes, the older males, which is what a trophy is, are taken off before they die naturally and sold to visiting hunters who wish to display to experience the hunt and display the trophies on their walls in their homes. So all of that activity, the land being kept in its natural state, the land being populated by various species of game, would not be possible without the funds raised from trophy hunting. A typical hunt in Africa ranges from, for a budget plains game hunt with a few species of plains game, maybe $5,000 for 7 days, including your couple of trophies, 3 or 4 trophies, to more serious expeditions, which can go 10 days, 2 weeks, and involve one or more members of the big five being Cape buffalo, elephant, lion, rhino, and leopard. Although hunting for rhino is essentially non-existent now. And I'll talk more about that later. Hunting for leopard and lion is rather curtailed again. But Cape buffalo are plentiful and probably the most common species sought by these wannabe Hemingways. So the second type of hunt, I said there were 2 general experiences, types of experience. The second type of experience is in a large unfenced government-owned concession. The land belongs to the government. It's usually adjacent to a national park. The government leases out to a safari operator, and the safari operator is given a quota of animals by species that he can take off in a year, and he then resells that quota to hunters and charges a daily rate for the time that the hunter is there as well. Again, without this money, these areas would not be left in their wild state. There would be very little wildlife on them. And these buffer zones serve as a way to control the populations in the national parks themselves, in that the constant offtake helps to keep the numbers of wildlife in check and brings in much needed government money to the governments, and in particular to the parks branch of the government, which they use for administering the parks, and they're paying their staff and they're operating their vehicles and so on. So again, none of this would be possible without funding from wealthy, not only American, but also European, particularly German, French, and Russian hunters who, those are countries with strong hunting traditions. So, that's the other side of the coin is the money goes to a very good cause. And the animals that are taken as trophies, as I mentioned, are mature or aging males who have lived out their lives in these areas, and if they're not hunted and taken, they're going to die and rot and be eaten by vultures and hyenas. So their offtake has almost zero impact on the population of wildlife. On the contrary, the hunting activity ensures that the other wildlife and many species of birds and smaller mammals and of course all of the indigenous flora flourish. So this is not this sport does not deserve the criticism that it gets. I mentioned rhinos earlier. Did you know that South Africa is one of the few countries that has a population left of rhinos, and that those rhinos are largely on private land, and that the land is that their survival is funded either directly or indirectly by hunting activity for other species? You can hunt a rhino in South Africa. Very, very few are killed. Typically a handful a year for huge prices. But there's a thing called a green hunt, where you can hunt a rhino with a tranquilizer dart, and nobody's any the worse off. The hunter gets his experience. The rhino gets to snooze for a couple of hours. The photos are taken, and the money again is plowed back into conservation, albeit perhaps not the type of conservation that most people envisage. One final point, most of the people who were commenting on this hunt were completely ignorant. They thought these buffalo were called water buffalo. A water buffalo is something you find in Asia, and it's been exported to countries like Australia. It's a much more docile beast. This is a Cape buffalo, which is a particularly well, it's just a wild animal that is particularly aggressive. Although, you know, if the animal is just going about its business, it's typically not aggressive. What happens is occasionally you'll get a hunter who wounds an animal. He makes a bad shot, and these animals are notoriously hard to kill. And once the adrenaline gets going, they become very hard to kill, and then they get cunning, and they will actually hunt down the hunter, the hunting party, and try to kill as many of them as possible. One of their favorite ploys is to make a loop back downwind of their own track and then wait in ambush in a thick patch of brush next to their track. So when the hunting party is on the trail of the wounded buffalo, they will pass right by that thick bush, and the buffalo will charge out. And typically, there's not much time to react. And even if shots are fired, the buffalo is not going to die right away. And in the intervening time, he's going to inflict a lot of damage on these humans. So it's a dangerous sport, and that's part of its attraction. That's my first topic of today. My second topic has to do with Israel and Gaza. I read an article today where the German government said they're not going to supply any more arms to Israel. And I've read not too long ago an article where the British Prime Minister said that if Israel doesn't quit soon, they're going to recognize a Palestinian state. And this just boggles my mind. I guess there are a lot of people who side with the Palestinians in this struggle, battle, war, whatever you want to call it, between Hamas and Israel. Israel, I think, miscalculated somewhat. They thought that they had the support of all of these Western countries, and of course, politics being politics, support depends on which way the wind's blowing. And in some of these countries, even in the United States, there's a growing protest movement, which politicians, believe me, they pay attention to. And they, having no backbone of their own or no moral compass of their own, they just bow whichever way in whichever direction the wind's blowing. The fact is that the so-called innocent civilian population is not that innocent. Hamas got into power in Gaza with the support of the civilian population, and Hamas terrorized, harassed Israel for decades with the support of the civilian population, who tolerated or even encouraged the firing of rockets at random into civilian areas in Israel. And of course, rejoiced when Israel was invaded on the famous terrorist attack of whatever it was, October 7th, I think, or December 7th. I can't remember which it was. I think December 7th, a couple of years ago. So they can't pretend to be innocent victims at this point. Hamas also bears a lot of responsibility for hiding within and behind civilian populations and in civilian areas, built up areas. The term human shield, I think, was coined in Gaza. And it's a deliberate tactic on the part of Hamas, thinking that, Israel wouldn't dare injure civilians because of the outcry that might follow. And they're right. But Israel was provoked to the point now where they didn't have much option but to try to eradicate Hamas and minimize the collateral damage in the process. The pictures are horrific. The buildings in Gaza have been largely destroyed. There are people living in makeshift shelters. They're being fed by charities, food aid and what have you. So naturally there's sympathy for them, but realistically they brought this on themselves. And realistically, Israel cannot allow that area to revert to the status quo ante, i.e. Hamas in control of an area right cheek and jowl next to Israel and free to lob ordnance and rockets into civilian areas in Israel willy-nilly. So they're going to finish the job, and I think they're entitled to finish the job. And frankly, the only outcome that will ensure their security in the future is that that area is devoid of Hamas, which means basically it has to be under control of Israel in some way, shape, or form, as it was prior to, I think, 1984 or something, when the Israelis handed it over to the Palestinian Authority at the time, and subsequently Hamas took over. All of these countries that criticize don't offer any real plans that might work for both sides. They're just playing the PR game, and it's pretty sickening. So, yeah, it's taken longer than it should have. Urban warfare is a messy business that, is not quickly accomplished. But Israel at this point cannot back away and let things return to what they were before. They've got too much at stake, and Hamas has proven themselves to be a vicious gang of thugs and terrorists willing to inflict damage on Israeli citizens, civilians. So they shouldn't whine when they are dealt some of their own medicine in return. And that's all I have to say about that subject. I hope you, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, but I hope you found my views interesting and challenging. And with that, I say thank you and have a good one.